unicorn snot.
And welcome to another episode of Stuck in My Mind podcast. I'm your host, Wize, and my next guest is truly an expert in her field. I'm excited to speak to her. Let's not wait. Welcome to the show, Kelle Sparta.
Thank you for having me here.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, let's just start out. What was your first introduction to the world of metaphysics, and how did it shape your path as a transformational shaman?
Well, so my mother said I was talking to ghosts in my crib. So we'll start with that. She raised me in the New Age movement from the time I was like 4 or 5. So I've been studying this stuff for 50 years at this point. And having been raised in it, there's a unique perspective when you grow up with this stuff. It really just gets into your bones, right? It formed, a lot of this stuff came into my awareness before I was even at the age of reason, which we don't hit until 7, right?
Yeah.
And my mother also was doing nursing school at the same time, and I was her study buddy. So all of Grey's Anatomy is in the back of my head somewhere, and occasionally comes flying out of my mouth at random moments. And I'm like, I didn't even know I knew that. And I go look it up, and I'm like, and that's right. It's like terrifying, but it's there. So, starting in this space, it's so funny because I have signatures from my high school yearbook that read like client testimonials. It's just, it's not what I do, it's who I am, right? Yeah.
So you have an extensive background in personal growth and healing techniques. How do you integrate different practices like Chinese medicine, LP, and energy work into your coaching?
So I have a wide variety of different backgrounds and stuff.
I see that.
So yeah, it's pretty massive. And so I don't actually discern the difference between them in my work. I will like mix and match stuff all the time. And so like I'll offer people advice on, I was at a networking event in Richmond a few years back, and somebody was complaining about night sweats, and I'm like, add 2 ounces of soy to your coffee in the morning and you won't have that problem anymore. And I came back to the next meeting, they're like, oh my God, you're a miracle worker. And I'm just like, okay. And so, it depends on what I'm doing. I may use Chinese medicine on somebody, I may not. I may use work in the chakras, I may not. I may look at somebody's aura, I may do some psychic readings, I may have some mediumship that comes up. Every person needs something different. And so I use the tools from my massive toolbox to implement in the moment. So people are like, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to do Reiki? I'm like, I don't know, I'm a Reiki master. I haven't used it a lot in the recent years, but it could happen. I don't know what I'm going to use on you.
It depends on the situation, I
Yeah.
guess, right? It depends on the situation and the person. Awesome.
Yeah.
For someone new to spiritual awakening, what are some initial steps they can take to begin their journey?
Oh, well, so the first thing that I tell my students all the time is you have to let go of the goal, because the goal exists in the future and all spiritual work happens in the present. And if you are holding on to the I must be spiritual, I must be evolved, I must you are living in the future and you will not actually make any progress until you get into the present. And so, rule number 1, let go of the goal. Rule number 2 is to allow yourself to have the feelings that you're having, because the vast majority of people who come into spirituality are coming out of traumatic backgrounds. and we shut down our emotions and we manage them with our brains. We go, I'm going to think through this emotion, right? It's like I can reason it out and I can make myself feel better by reasoning it out. It does not work that way.
Mm-hmm.
It is an illusion. And the sooner you can learn to feel your feelings, now I'm going to give you an exception to that, but the sooner you can learn to feel your feelings, the faster you will progress on the path, because feelings only last for 30 seconds to a couple minutes and then they're done, right? But if you stop them, they last a lifetime. And so we don't want to do that. The exception to that is you do not want to go into your rage or your depression, because if you go into those two things, you get more of them. Those are amplifiers. If you go headlong into the depression, if you go headlong into the rage, you will just get more rage or more depression. And so those you need to, for the rage, you need to find a release for it. So, like grabbing a pool noodle and beating the crap out of your bed and then smudge your bed because you don't want to sleep in that. For the depression, you need to find a different thing to do, something else to focus on. So ideally, like walking through a doorway, because our brain expects a change of state when we walk through doorways. So walk through a doorway and go do something different. I don't care if you don't feel like it, just go do something different. And if you get active, then it's more likely to be able to help you move out of that. Now, I do want to say this, and I say this every chance I get because nobody knows this, not even doctors. And what happens if you are doing a loading dose of vitamin D? And when I say loading dose, I mean like 20,000 to 50,000 IUs a week, right? If you're doing a lot of vitamin D supplementation and you're taking calcium, this will produce a chemical depression in 40% of the population. And so if you are starting to feel like you're like suicidal ideations, right? And you are doing these two supplements, immediately stop taking whichever one is, if you're on a week-long time release of the vitamin D, stop taking the calcium, right? Until you get to the point where you do the vitamin D again, and then just reduce your dosage. But that can create, and I just had a friend of mine who had that experience. She was like, I'm having suicidal ideation. And she's like, I don't have any reason to feel this way. And I had the same experience. And it's like, look, it's chemically induced. Stop taking it. 2 days later, she's like, I feel so much better. I'm like, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's just my PSA for the moment.
Well, I guess you just shared one an approach to healing when by telling a story about your friend and what she was going through. What is it? What is the alchemy of self, and how does it tie into everything you're doing?
So the alchemy of self is there are multiple ways to language that. You can call it the ego death. You can call it a shamanic death. You can call it just alchemy. But the idea is to bring yourself from one state of beingness to the next enlightened state of beingness, right? And so the idea there is that you up level your sense of self, because we are all infinitely creative, infinitely wise, spiritual beings having a physical experience, right? And we don't believe that. And so therefore we don't access it all the time. And so the alchemy of self is the process of releasing the stories, the beliefs, the assumptions that we have about ourselves, such that we can claim that higher level of self. And it's a process, because most people can't let go of this limited state of being and go, oh, I am all wise and all powerful and I am good and I've got it and I'm fully integrated, fully enlightened. If you could just do that, you could be fully enlightened in a heartbeat, right? But most of us have these things that go, well, no, but I can't be that because I'm this. And, we go through steps to be able to allow ourselves to feel like, okay, the next step is possible. Okay, the next step is possible, right? So, and that's the alchemy of self. And I actually just did a podcast on my Spirit Guides podcast about this earlier today. We talked about the ego death and what it's all about. It's called Lego My Ego.
Lego My Ego. In your experience as a psychic and medium, What have been some of your most profound encounters?
So, and this one goes back to the healing story too. I had a friend of mine whose sister was in a horrific car accident, and like, jaws of life. It took him an hour and a half to get her out of the car. That's how bad it was.
Wow.
And my friend called me in tears, and she's like, "Oh my God, my sister's been in this accident, and can you help?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Let me see." And so I went to her sister energetically, and the accident had been so bad that her aura had shattered. And so there was like, she as a person didn't exist energetically anymore. It was just this massive energy that was sort of fractured. And so I literally had to put her back together again energetically in order to be able to get the question answered of, do you want to stay or do you want to go? Because if she wanted to go, I wasn't going to be allowed to interfere, right? And so I put her aura back together again and got the answer that she wanted to stay. And I'm like, okay. So I started working on her, and I laid out all the different things that were wrong with her, and did the math on that. And then I saw a brain bleed, and I'm like, okay, well, we gotta fix that before she gets to the hospital. And because otherwise nothing else is gonna matter. So I did work on that. And I did some work shoring up the other injuries, right? But I fixed the brain bleed, and then did some work on shoring up the other injuries, and called my friend, and I'm like, okay, she's decided to stay. This is what I found. This is what I did. Blah blah blah. And my friend got back to me shortly thereafter, after she got her to the hospital, and they'd gone through all the tests, and every single thing I said was wrong with her, except for the brain bleed, was there. And they said if there had been a brain bleed, they wouldn't have been able to operate to save her life. And I was like, yeah. So that was a profound moment. I had someone else come to me whose son had been in a coma for 4 years. And she was like, can you do anything for him? And I said, well, let me take a look. And it turned out that he was he had the potential to be a powerful shaman. And then there had been an entity that had attacked him, trying to get to him before he could get into his full power, and had shoved him out of his body, which is why he was comatose.
Wow.
And so I went and I did some work. I got rid of the thing, and I brought him back into his body, but he had been out of it for 4 years, right? So I came back to his mom and I said, no, I was never in his hospital room. I was doing this from my home, right? And I came back to his mom and his sister who had come for that. And I said, okay, here's the deal. I said, he's back in his body now, but it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks for him to actually fully integrate back in and be able to move his body again. So I would expect him to wake up in 2 to 3 weeks. And when he does, then, come and see me and we'll talk some more. And I think it was like 2 weeks and 2 days, he woke up. And, she was like, okay, now what? And I'm like, well, he's still got to go through his trial, and he's still got this and da da da. And we did some work, and I'm like, I can't, every shaman has an initiation. I cannot interfere in the initiation. I said, so there will come another initiation point where he will have to go through that, and he will either make it or he won't. I said, but I've set him up with as much as I can give him, and that's what I've got. Right. So, yeah. I've had a woman who her brother had passed by suicide 7 years earlier, and we were at a spiritual event, and she walked up to me and she's talking to me about him, and he comes slamming into my awareness. And I look, and she's like, do you think you could tell me whether or not he's okay? And I said, he's sitting here right now yelling at you. And she's like, what? I said, he's saying, I'm fine. I'm fucking fine. Would you please stop asking? Get over it. Let it go. And she just looked at me. She's like, oh my God, that's so him. I'm like, he's begging you to please let it go.
For every psychic medium is different when they receive. For you, how is it for you? How is the experience for you?
So there are a lot of different ways to get information.
Yeah.
And so, when I'm doing mediumship, I'm literally seeing the person there. I'm talking, they're talking to me, and I'm just being a translator, right?
Yeah.
When I'm talking with spirit, I may talk with them and then translate, or they may channel through me, which is basically channeling is possession with permission, just so you know. So they channel through me, and I've gotten to the point where I am a conscious channel, so I don't disappear or get pushed out of the way or whatever. And so I do a fair amount of that, and I also get information from other people's energy fields because I'm an empath. And I can also get, if somebody is a strong transmitter, I may pick up information from them psychically. I remember years ago, before I had good shields up, I was doing a psychic fair, and this woman walked in behind me, and I could feel her rooting around in my brain, going, "Is she any good? Is she any good? I don't know. I wonder if she's any good." And I turned around, I'm like, "I'm very good. Stop that, please. It's quite rude." She was like, she had no idea she'd been doing it. But yeah.
Wow.
I got a million stories.
you speak a lot about personal evolution. I'm sorry. How does someone navigate a shift in identity while staying grounded?
Oh, well, that's a big ask right there. So when we talk about, and this is back to that spirit alchemy thing, it's the same thing, shamanic death, right? So it depends upon the intensity of the shift that you're doing. Okay. If you're doing a minor shift, staying grounded is not a big deal. But if you're doing a major deconstruction of your foundation, I literally call it foundational deconstruction. If you are just deconstructing everything that your life and your identity stands upon, you will not stay grounded for that. Okay. Because you're literally pulling up the foundation of your existence. And you will be floaty and airheady and not able to be present in your body. You'll probably lose all ability to do rote applications. So things like you'll find yourself getting out of the shower with shampoo still in your hair. You'll run into doorways because you don't know where your edges are. You'll not forget to put the toothpaste on the toothbrush before you brush your teeth. All the rote activities just cease to be rote because they were built into the foundation. And so you have to be conscious about everything you do.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing that level of deconstruction, that you will not stay grounded for, it's physically impossible. And the other strong recommendation is, if you're going through that level of deconstruction, do not try to reconstruct quickly. Allow yourself to be in the deconstructed state for as long as it takes for it to automatically and naturally come back together again on its own. Because if you try to reconstruct too quickly, you're going to reconstruct yourself into a lower level of evolution. Because your head, your mind, which would be doing the construction, has not evolved into the state that your beingness is about to evolve into. And so you need to avoid using the mind to reconstruct, because it will pull you backwards.
Okay. What role does sound healing play in your practice, and how does it affect the energetic body?
Sound healing plays actually a fairly large role, because I use my voice a lot for the work. I was told 20 years ago by a medium that my voice carries healing properties. And so I do a lot of work with my voice and sound healing. So the thing about sound healing, our entire beingness is a vibration. And everything within your field has its own vibrational frequency. And the entirety of everything makes up your energy signature. Okay. And an energy signature, easiest way to figure that out is to say it's a flavor of energy, right? So everyone's got their own specific flavor of energy. And that energy is made up of all of the things within them. And so when I do sound healing for people, there's a couple of different things that I do with that. One is that I use my voice to break up stuck energy, right? Or to shift the energy vibration in a particular aspect of someone into a different vibrational frequency, right? I can pull energies up, I can pull energies down, I can break things open, whatever, with my voice. Now, the other thing that I do is I express stuck emotions. And so, especially in live sessions with people, if they've got stuck grief or stuck rage or stuck, whatever is in their field, betrayal and frustration, whatever, that can come out as I do the energy healing on them. I give voice to those emotions. And so for grief, it would be like this keening sound. And for rage, it's like, it's like everything has its own emotional sound, right? And I am channeling those stuck energies through me to release them out as emotional release. And I'm feeling those emotions as I do that. And people are like, wow, isn't that a lot? And it really isn't that much for me because it's not my emotion, right? I'm just processing the emotion for the person, right? And so the giving voice to it is what allows it to release for them too, right? I can feel it all day long if I want to feel it, but it's not going to release it from them. But the vocalization of it is what allows it to release through the energy work that I'm doing with them, because I am entraining my energy with theirs and then using that to release the energy with the vocalization.
Have you ever been in a situation where you're on stage and there's just, and you have a crowd of people out there, and there's just one person just that person is just shouting out to you?
Yeah, that happens. I'm also known for telling a random story that somebody in the audience will come up to me and say, "You told my story." I'm like, sorry, I pulled the energy out of the room. But I get that a lot. They're like, "You just told my whole story." And I'm like, you had it in the room.
Should have put it out there.
I'm just saying, it was not my intention to steal your story and tell it to the room. I didn't tell them it was yours because I didn't know, right?
Yeah. Yes. So, as your role as a spiritual coach, what is one of the most rewarding aspects of this work?
I love seeing people step into their power, and it just makes me happy. It was very interesting. I was doing an advanced class, and one of the students was ready. So what happens when people come in to study with you is the first thing they do is they hang their power on you, because they don't know where they're going. They don't know what they're doing. They don't have any sense of anything. They're just trusting you to shepherd them into the space that they need to be in. And so they just hook their power onto you. Now, early stage teachers will see this and go, "Ooh, more power for me," right? That is not what that is about. Your job is to steward that power, not to use that power until the person's ready to take it back. Well, we were doing this advanced level class, and this woman was ready to take her power back. But she was trying to fight me for it. And I'm like, "No, you don't have to fight me for it. It's right here. You can have it. You're welcome to it." But she didn't trust that. And she's like, "Oh," and I'm like, but no, really, you can have it, right? We had this back and forth for like half an hour, and the interesting part was that the other students in the class just sort of tuned out. They didn't realize the profoundness of what was happening in that moment. And my partner, who was helping me run the workshop, she was like, "Wow, that was impressive," right? Because she was just like, "Damn," because she really was trying to fight me for this, right? And I was just saying, "No, you can have it. It's okay." But what? No, okay, but you can have it, back and forth for half an hour. And that was one of my favorite moments, because she realized she didn't have to fight for it. And she realized it was always there and always hers the whole time. And that I was just like, I had just let it stay there because that's where she put it. I had no attachment to it, right? And for her to just like pick it up and take it back, I was like, "Oh, yes, baby, yes, go you." And so it was one of my that's I just love watching people step into their power. I've got a couple of students right now who are, they've been studying with me for a while at this point, and they both have finally just gone, "Oh, I can do this." "Look at me, I'm psychic, and I have skills, and I'm like, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." And they've had them for a while, but they haven't acknowledged that they had them until just now, right? So that's what I love.
So how can empaths and highly sensitive individuals protect their energy while still being of service to others?
Great question. So the very first thing I'm going to say is that um, the first thing you have to do is learn how to hold your energy properly, because empaths, by definition, are holding their energy fields improperly. And when I say improperly, it was appropriate for what you grew up with, because it allowed you to have an emergency management system that gave you early warning in case somebody was in trouble, somebody was upset, or somebody was angry or whatever, and so you could get out of the way. But it is not serving you now. And so there is a free class on my website at kellesparta.com. If you go to the blog and click on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a thing that says Boundaries for Empaths. That is a free class. Please, please, please go sign up for that class and take it, because it is life-changing for empaths. It's going to show you how to change your energy, how you hold your energy field, and explain to you how all of the, how your life is being impacted by holding your energy field in this improper way, and the changes that will happen as a result. And so I highly recommend that you go get that first. That's step number one. Step number two is that you need to learn to keep your energy field in the way that I show you in the class for a while, right? So you're going to have to be disciplined to change the way you hold your energy field for 6 to 8 weeks. You're going to have to check it multiple times a day and do it over and over again until your body learns that this is the new normal, right? And once you have that, then it's about being able to hold your energy that way and then put a shield around it, right? And so the shielding process will not work for an empath until you learn how to hold your energy field properly. Okay.
Okay.
And so once you do all of those things, now then it's a matter of getting yourself to a point where you recognize that you don't have to give yourself away to be of service. Okay, because that's the other problem that empaths have, is that we have a tendency to hand away all of our well-being, all of our stuff, all of our energy, everything we have, and we sacrifice it on the altar of other people's happiness. And so, you have to learn how to stand into your own power. You have to learn how to stand into your own value as a human, your right to take up space in the world, your willingness to dream dreams for yourself and not just for others. These are all pieces and parts to the solution of this, right? To step into a solid identity of your own rather than being a reflection of those around you. And so all of these pieces go into that truly healthy way of being in the world. And the short answer is, learn how to manage your energy field and how to protect yourself with shields, and choose carefully what you give to others, right? Because you don't have to ever give your own energy. You are always capable of channeling the energy of the universe instead of giving your own energy. And I highly recommend that that's what you do.
Okay. What do you believe are some of the biggest misconceptions about shamanism, and how can people better understand this practice?
So, great question. The first thing you need to know is that if you ask 100 shamans what shamanism is, they're going to give you 100 different answers. Okay. And that's because shamanism is not a regulated or structured sort of thing. It is a beingness path in alignment with nature. There's a reason I call myself a transformational shaman, because my work is specifically around the alchemy of the soul, right? And helping people to find a path to happiness and self-evolution and things like that, and energetics, magic. But each shaman's skill set determines how they define shamanism for themselves, right? And so the other thing that I have found in recent years, so when I became a shaman like 15, 18 years ago now, when I started using the term, nobody knew what a shaman was. I mean, very few people had a clue. And today, it's the opposite. Everybody thinks they know what a shaman is, but they all think that shamans are all about the ayahuasca and the peyote and the San Paulo and all the other plant medicine.
Yeah.
And that's not true. Not, there are a lot of shamans who don't do that. So you cannot make the assumption that if you hear the term shaman, that plant medicine is going to be involved. I don't ever use plant medicine in my work. And that's, it's just because I teach people other pathways to get there. So, one of the biggest challenges that I've seen recently is that people have gotten into the plant medicine world and they're treating it not like medicine, they're treating it like a drug. I actually personally know somebody who went on 97 ayahuasca journeys in a year. And I'm like, and I looked at him and he was being consumed by a dark goddess. I was like, he's like, well, no, that's my patron. I said, no, she's eating you. She is eating you. And you need to get away from her. He'd done so many journeys that the plant stopped working for him because he wasn't treating it with reverence. And so he just blew himself wide open in an unprotected space with, obviously this entity came in and said, oh, you look yummy, and started eating him. And I'm like, and she had him completely brainwashed. And he was convinced that no, she was his patron and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, but you chose to ask me to lunch for a reason. Your part of you knows that this is not right. And you knew that asking me to lunch, well, I would whack you in the head with this. And so maybe you should listen to me. And he's like, no. I'm like, okay. I can't do anything about it if you're unwilling to see it. So, But yeah, so be careful. That's what I'm saying. Ayahuasca, if you do ayahuasca, it shouldn't be more than once or twice a year, max.
Oh yeah, no. It's. I had someone who spoke about it, but it wasn't something like you said they did every constant. They were like, it was a retreat they did every year, once a year, and they went and did this retreat once a year, but like you said, once you start abusing it,
it will abuse you back.
You don't respect the energy, you don't respect what it does. So you lose the value of it, and it affects you. Like you said, a dark entity took over, and wow, that's just, and it's great because people don't know this is really this. I believe it because I've experienced stuff and seen, and it was my first wife who introduced me to all of this, and I've always been a believer. But there was one time I went to see my sister at work, and I went behind the counter and I was talking to her, and there was a older lady, and she told my sister, she said, he's protected. And my sister says, what? She says, yeah, he's protected. There's this older white lady next to him with some silver white hair. She's standing right next to him all the time. And my sister took her phone out, and it was my aunt, showed the picture of my aunt who had passed recently and whatever, and we were very close. And she's like, yeah, that's her.
Yep, that happens more often than you think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's people out there that are amazing, and some people, it's a shame that some people are ridiculed with it, or like, oh, you're fake, or whatever it is. I've seen a lot to know that a lot of it's real. A lot of this is it's very important.
When I met my husband, he was a skeptic.
Yeah.
And in fact, every guy I ever dated was a skeptic, right? So I always had a policy. I'm like, look, you don't have to believe what I believe. You just have to not mock me. That's my only criteria, right?
Yeah.
And my husband, after about I don't know, 6 or 8 months, because I was doing readings from the house and blah, blah, blah. And, I'd be doing things over the internet. And he would know that I was not out researching people and trying to figure stuff out about them and whatever. He'd see everything I was doing throughout the day. And he's like, you never look these people up. I'm like, no, why would I do that? And he's like, He's like, well, some people would do. I'm like, but then it would impact my perception of who they are. I don't want to have preconceived notions. I just want to show up and read what's there. And he would hear me talk, and he would hear them going, oh my God, on the other end of the phone. And he's just like, after about 8 months, I couldn't say that it wasn't true because, I just saw all of this evidence that it was working. And, and one day, you want to talk about psychic skills. So my friend Kathy was staying with us, and she was going to visit her brother at the airport. She was going to the airport to go visit her brother. It's a 2.5-hour flight, right? Flight's on time, no problem. Just before she's getting ready to leave, I'm like grabbing a little bag and I'm stuffing as much high protein food as I possibly can into this bag.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give her a bigger bag, but I knew I would not be able to get her to take, because she's like the quintessential efficient packer, one small bag, that's it. If it doesn't fit in the bag, it doesn't come.
Go.
And so I gave her the biggest bag I knew would fit in that bag. And I had to force it on her. She's like, I don't need this. What is that? I'm like, just take it. And she's like, but I don't need, I'm just take it, or I will shove it in your bag myself. And she's like, fine, I'll take it. So she texts 9 hours later that her flight has been delayed 6 times. She's in the airport. All the food places are closed, and she's eaten everything in the bag and could have eaten more if I had given it to her. And she said, I will never doubt you again.
I'm sure she won't.
This is the sort of thing, these are the things that just sort of show up in the ethers. So like I'm running a retreat in a couple of weeks here in Panama. But the last retreat we ran before this, which was before COVID, we were getting ready the night before. So we always look over the next day, the night before, because whatever happened during the day may have shifted what we want to do the next day and that sort of thing. And so Kathy and I were going over that. And she's like, okay, so we're going to do our check-ins in the morning. We'll need half an hour for that. And I'm like, well, we're going to need an hour and a half. And she's like, there's only, so many people. How could we possibly need an hour and a half? I don't know, but we're going to need an hour and a half. And she's like, but this was after, the food incident. So she's like, okay, hour and a half. And we put it on the schedule. And the next morning we got up, and one of our participants had looked at me and said, I feel weird. I feel like sort of numb and weird. And I'm like, okay, we'll come over here and we'll do some energy work on you. And she walked over, and as she's walking to me, she starts to collapse, and I grab her and I get her into a chair. And I determined pretty quickly, all of Grey's Anatomy in the back of my brain, remember, that she's having a stroke. And I'm like, okay, we're going to get you out the door to the hospital right now. And so I've got everybody going out, packing her bags, getting all of her stuff together, getting everything in the car, getting her in the car, getting shoes on her, whatever, right? And we have her to the hospital within 20 minutes of the onset of the stroke. And the doctors said that she would not have survived the stroke had she not made it to the hospital that quickly, because it was a massive clot. And by the time we got back and got everybody back on track, it was an hour and a half for the time frame. So these are the sorts of things
that happen,
right? Yeah. So it's like, oh, well, that would be why we needed an hour and a half, because we had somebody have a stroke at the retreat. Yeah. And interestingly, she was psychic too, because she was not supposed to be at that retreat. Her partner was at the retreat, but she was not going to come. And she registered like 2 days before the retreat. She said, oh, I think I'm going to come. And she said that if she'd had that experience at home, she would have just sat in her chair and waited for it to pass.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how do you combine metaphysical practices with your teachings on happiness and personal fulfillment?
I think they're the same, honestly. So, fulfillment is about the fullest expression of your authentic self, right? It's that space. And you can't be in the fullest expression of your authentic self unless you're willing to receive love unconditionally, receive money unconditionally, allow yourself to be who you are without regrets or apology, to be able to step into your full power in the world, right? To be able to choose what you want for yourself with a powerful intention. all of those things are interrelated, and happiness comes from being who you are on a daily basis, in a space that you want to be in on a daily basis, with people you want to spend time with on a daily basis. That is where happiness comes from. It is from a space of being grateful for what you have. And if you cannot be grateful for what you have, then you need to have the courage to change it. Right?
Okay.
And that's
Yeah.
what the work is all about.
Awesome. Okay, let's see. In your view, what in your view, what are the key components for someone who wants to turn this into a business, kind of like wants to be able to use their talents and their skills in a professional manner?
Yeah. So the first thing is you need to prove to yourself that you can do it,
Okay.
because that's usually the biggest challenge, right? And so initially, I would say give away as many readings, healings, whatever, as you need to until you feel like you know you can do this and do it well, right? People are capable of doing it well long before they are capable of believing that they do it well, in my experience. Okay. And so, do a lot of free sessions until you've convinced yourself that you're good. Okay. Because until you've convinced yourself that you're good, you will not be able to charge what you're worth, because you won't believe in your own value. And so what you'll do is you'll end up undercharging and asking for validation for the remainder of the value, right? So, it will tell me how good it was, right? So that's step one. Step two is get really clear about who you are. What is the core essence of who you are? Because we have a tendency, most people who start their businesses in this fashion are coming out of jobs. And so they have a tendency to think of their business as a job, and it's absolutely not a job. Okay. It is not a discrete thing that you do. It is, in the spiritual world, you are bringing the essence of who you are into the world. And who I am is I carry the energy of transformation. Okay. It took me a decade to be able to say that that's what it was, because it took me a long time to do the math on it. Okay. So I'm going to tell you to start looking for it now. And you will find it reflected in the people's descriptions who know you best. So you ask people to describe you, and then you listen for the common themes. So, it was in my common themes were, oh, she's so insightful. Oh, she said this random thing to me 2 years ago, and it totally changed my life. Random thing at a party 2 years ago, right? And and I get that a lot, by the way. And I kept getting these reflections back of massive change, massive change, massive change, massive change. And even then, for a while, I said I carried the energy of change, and that's not entirely true. It's transformation, right? It's not just change; it's transformation. And so, really get in touch with who you are, because you will inherently build a business model that is offering something much smaller than who you are if you don't do that. And it'll take you a long time to come to the place where you can make reasonable money at it, right? Most people come out and they're like, oh, well, I do psychic readings. Oh, I do tarot cards. Oh, I do mediumship. Oh, I do love. Stop defining yourself based on those things, because most of those things are people come to as novelties, right? They're like, oh, this would be fun, right? They don't take it seriously. When you start to really make a living at this, it's because you're promising outcomes, and you have a process that you walk people through. And you need to be able to framework that process, right? You need to be able to explain to people why they want to do it with you, right?
Yeah.
And that process is another piece of the puzzle. Okay. So once you know the energy you carry, now you know the outcome that you want to deliver. Now you have to be able to language that outcome. So Kathy and I do transformational experiences, right? And these are things where you literally walk in one person and walk out another person, right? Because we're walking you through that alchemy, right? That spirit alchemy process, the shamanic death, right? And nobody knew what we were talking about. They didn't know what that was. And I'm like, okay. It took me a good 8 years to come up with the terminology to say, okay, do you know those moments in your life where something happens and you have to make a choice? And whichever choice you make, your life will never be the same again. And they go, yeah, okay, we create those experiences. Okay. Now people have a way to understand it. But before that, they didn't understand it at all. They had no way to hook into it. They had no way to connect to it. Right. And so people in the spiritual world have a really difficult time languaging what they do because it is so esoteric. And so, that's one of the hardest pieces, is coming up with that. And so I'm actually doing a process for people that I do a spiritual business consultation to help them to figure this stuff out, right?
Okay.
So I sit down with them and figure all of the, what are all your skill sets? What is everything you do? What are you passionate about? What is your knowledge base? How do you want to live your life? How do you want your business to be? Who do you want to work with, and how do you want to work with them? And then we sit down and we do all this math together to figure it out, right? Because it is so hard. It is the single most difficult thing, is to be able to figure out your signature offer that you make, because we all have like 50 things that we do, right? It's like, well, what do I say? And well, it's just custom. It's like, but custom doesn't necessarily tell people what it is, right?
Yeah.
They need to understand it. They need to have something to hang their perspective on it. They need to have a framework to be able to see that you have a clue what you're talking about, and you're not just sort of like blowing smoke at them, because it is very esoteric. How do they know how it's going to impact their lives, right? All of these things are relevant in order to be able to figure out how to do it. And the more effectively you do those things, the more money you make doing what you're doing. Because the bigger the outcome, the bigger the payment for that outcome, right? And the really interesting thing is that the higher the price point that you work at, the more committed the people are that you work with. And so they get even bigger results because they're committed at a higher level, and therefore the results are even better.
Okay. Oh, amazing. We've come to the point of the show where it's the sad part of the show, because we are about to close it out. But it's been great. Thank you. This has been awesome. I love the conversation. I love the answers. Now it's time where you get the solo screen and you get to plug away and let everybody know where they can find you, where they can check everything out for either consultation or the free test you offered as well. So
Yep.
Here you go.
Awesome. So you can see on the screen is kellesparta.com, Kelle. And that's where you can find the Boundaries for Empaths download. You click on the blog and it'll be there, and not download, free class. You can take that. The spiritual business consultation, which is the thing I was just talking about, that's also available on the website under the services tab. If you'd like an energy reading to find out, sort of what's going on and what's in the way of your personal evolution, you can get that. It's called a SEER reading, SEER. That's also under the services tab. But check me out on my podcasts. I have a Spirit Guides podcast and I have a Spirit Sherpa podcast. So both of those have a huge amount of content. So, check them out and enjoy.
Awesome. It's been great having you on the show. Don't leave just yet. Let me close out the show, and then we'll chat a little, and then yeah. But thank you for being such a great guest. I had a great time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, another great show is in the books. As always, thank you for everyone who tunes into the show. If you haven't subscribed or hit the notification bell, please do. As always, big shout out to my real Wize fam, Poppy J, Brandy J. Love you guys. Big shout out to the boss lady. Love you and appreciate everything you do for me, babe. Big shout out to Kelle Sparta for coming through and sharing her amazing stories, and I'm looking forward to signing up and checking out a couple of stuff on our page right now. And as always, a big shout out to all the essential workers out there. God bless you. Be safe. You know your boy Wize does it. Peace out.